Welcome to episode 135 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who now gets to play golf for a living, John Scott Sloat.
Yeah, not because of the golf, because of the relationships.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right. It was funny. I was golfing with someone yesterday who breaks down swings. That's one of the things he does. And so he and I were chatting about this. Mm-hmm. And I kept hitting the ball off the tee and it kept going way left. I'm like, okay.
Now you're left-handed, though.
I'm left-handed.
So that's a slice for you.
I think so. I'm always confused. Anyway, I was doing that and I asked him, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? He goes, honestly, you need a new club. That's what he told me. And I said, so I have your permission to blame the equipment. And he said, yes.
Wow.
It was great. I may never buy a new club because, the equipment.
Yeah, obviously, yes. So yesterday was what was the official name? The Lancer?
The Grace Lancer outing.
Yes. Yeah. It's a golf outing that the institution puts on to help raise money for the school. And
for athletics, mostly. Yep. Our new president was on the 18th green. If you made a donation of any size, he would putt for you, and it would not count against you.
Yes.
So it was like a free
stroke.
Yeah,
so I'm going to be honest. I don't know if our new president listens to the show, but
he's at least familiar with it.
He's familiar with it.
He knows it exists.
He knows it exists, yes. But
he's a pretty good golfer from what I hear.
Well, at least the people I spoke with from yesterday seemed to indicate that his putting was not on target a lot yesterday. So, but hey, when you're the president, I mean,
it's good to be the president.
That's right. It doesn't really matter.
He had his son out there putting with him, so you kind of got a twofer.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, that's good. Good turnout. They had a morning and an afternoon session,
I think it was
right?
20 teams in the morning and 18 in the afternoon. So
that's good.
Good turnout.
Yeah. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. You can email the show, variousandsunderpodcast@gmail.com. We are on Facebook and on YouTube, Various and Sundry Podcast. We would love for you to leave a 5-star rating, and if you'd like, a review. And today we're going to try something a little bit different. We've been teasing this, and I think today is the day. We are going to make space for commercial breaks in the show.
At least we think we're going to do that.
Now, by the time this launches later today, they may not have filled those little gaps with
they have to sell them. They have to sell the spots?
I think so. I am not sure how it works yet.
Okay.
So we will proceed as if there will be commercial breaks, and I think later they can add them even so maybe if you listen to the episode today, this is unusual, we're recording on a Tuesday, same day it drops, but if you're listening to it maybe a week later or something like that, maybe by then the commercial breaks have been filled in, so we shall see. So we're just giving you a heads up on that. But all right, John, let's check in with the world of sports here. What's been going on?
Well, I think the biggest news is Bill Russell passed away.
Yeah,
over the weekend,
Sunday, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how old was Bill?
I think he was. I could be wrong on this. I thought it was 82.
Okay.
In his 80s.
Yeah. So definitely a full life.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, best known for winning 11 NBA championships with the Celtics.
Mm-hmm.
A dominant center, especially on the defensive end. And if I remember correctly, I think I heard this. I didn't watch much of any of the coverage of this, but I thought I heard that he was the first African American to be the head coach of a major professional sports team. I think that's correct. So obviously a legendary figure in the game of basketball. And as we were talking before the show, off air, had remarkable confidence.
Yes.
Even into his elder years.
Yeah. I remember when he said he would He would dominate.
That's your softened version.
I may be cleaning up the language
Your
a bit.
kid-friendly version, yes.
He would dominate the modern NBA players.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you kind of have to have that level of confidence and arrogance probably to be that level of player.
Oh, yeah.
But, it's always interesting to compare across eras like that when it comes to – obviously, I think it's undeniable that players on the whole have become much more athletic than they were when Bill Russell was playing. And as you pointed out, there's also much more of an emphasis on conditioning, on nutrition, and more attention paid to how do you fine-tune the body so that it performs at its maximum capacity.
Like, what was it? LeBron spent $1 million on his physical fitness.
It's probably that. I mean, I know he's got like a small staff around him.
Yeah.
It's probably 8 to 10 people.
I'm sure a nutritionist in there.
A nutritionist, a chef.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Personal trainers, masseuse, all those sorts of things to maximize performance and that kind of thing. But
and Bill Russell didn't have that.
No, he did not. So legendary NBA player. Typically, if you make one of your top 10, top 15 players in NBA history, he's probably on that or at least into the discussion.
Can't tell the story of basketball without him.
That's true. True. Also, off the field news. Finally, the NFL has announced.
Finally, my goodness,
it's taken forever.
They buried it as well.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a busy news week with Bill Russell dying and MLB trade deadline and all these things. Yeah,
Deshaun Watson, quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, has been suspended 6 games for inappropriate behavior with masseuses.
Yeah, cleaning up the dialogue a bit there.
Yeah,
as well. Yeah,
and
they're
going to appeal that.
Yeah, one of those games is against the Jets. I think the Jets have the Browns in week 2 or 3 this year. So I think Jacoby Brissett is the backup there.
Yeah, I think that's right. Former Colts quarterback.
Mm-hmm. And former Patriots.
So your thoughts on that? Right amount of games, too many, not enough?
I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea what's it feels like too few to me when they who did they get it for a season for gambling? They got somebody for almost a full year for gambling on football.
Oh, was that?
Do you know what I'm talking about?
It was a wide receiver for the Falcons, wasn't it? But I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah, they got him for a full season and for gambling on football. And this feels far more severe. Maybe it doesn't have direct impact on
that's
sport.
The thing. Anytime you have gambling involved, that's where you get the integrity of the game, and that's why that tends to get punished pretty severely. But I think we can all agree on the sort of morality scale.
Sure.
What Deshaun Watson is accused of is far worse than gambling. I'm a little surprised it was this low.
Yeah.
I expected at least 8, if not more.
A full season.
It's a PR nightmare. And I've talked to at least a couple of Browns fans who are so conflicted that they're debating whether they even want to root for the team this year.
Really? Because it was so light?
Well, because the Browns signed Deshaun Watson to begin with.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that'll be curious to see if that gets adjusted at all as a result of the appeal.
Well, normally they come out with that the suspension, and then it gets appealed and it gets reduced by a few games.
Right.
It feels like, right?
Yeah.
So does it go down to 4? That feels really light.
That feels really light because even the
maybe they appeal and go to 8.
I don't know that they end up getting bumped up, but yeah, it's just, man, 4 would seem like so light. I mean, isn't that basically what you get for the performance-enhancing drugs?
I think so. Yeah.
For your on your second offense, I think. Like your first offense, you get the warning, you go through the training or whatever, and then the second time they ding you for 4 games.
By the way, why does it have to be an even number? Like you and I are naturally going 4, 6, 8. Why can't it be 7?
Well, before last year, I would have argued because there's an even number of games in the season.
Yeah.
But now it's 17 games,
Yep.
not 16. So I don't know. I mean, why?
But we're naturally talking about 4, 6, 8.
Yeah.
Why not?
Not 5, 7, and 9.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't explain that. How are your Mets doing?
They've won 7 in a row. Trade deadlines tonight, and Jacob deGrom pitches for the first time this season tonight.
Okay.
So,
I mean, they're going to run him out there for 4 innings probably?
I would say 4 or 5. Yeah. I imagine he's on a maybe 80 pitches limit.
Yeah.
Hopefully stretching him out a little bit longer. But, yeah, excited to have him back. They've won 7 in a row. Hopefully tonight is 8, and we can keep the good times rolling.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that brings us to our first commercial break. We'll be right back after this. And we're back. Well, that was fun.
Yeah.
Who knows what happened during that time, right?
Yeah. That DraftKings ad was incredible. Yeah.
I might have I can't remember if I checked off like they give
I
you
hope
a
sports gambling
list.
isn't part of it.
There's a whole like set of categories that you can say I don't want ads in this category.
Well, it was.
I'm pretty sure I checked off gambling that you can't.
I was listening to a conservative political podcast the other day, and all of a sudden they had one of these ads inserted. It was Planned Parenthood was the ad.
Oh, wow.
I would not be for having a Planned Parenthood ad.
No, and so
in our podcast, please let us
know.
know.
Yeah, and if you as a listener hear an ad that you're uncomfortable with or upset by, please let us know. If we can figure out what category that ad comes from,
we'll
we
just get
can
rid of it.
exclude the category. So we'll see what we can do about that.
I'd be fine with a Lowe's or a Home Depot ad.
Yeah, sure.
That sounds great.
Yeah, that would be fine. We should probably talk about our main topic here, John.
Yeah, it's not commercial breaks.
It is not commercial breaks. It is, broadly speaking, I think our topic is essentially why does church history matter? Mm-hmm. And it's been prompted by, in one sense, it's prompted by we both love church history. Mm-hmm. You actually teach church history here at Grace.
Yep.
And there was an article that the Gospel Coalition put up entitled 13 Reasons We Need Church History. And so we'll kind of base off of that article, but I'm sure our conversation will wander all across this. But maybe we'll start with this. When did you first begin to appreciate and then love church history?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think when I took church history in college, I think that was the first time I really grew in appreciation for it. Mm-hmm. I didn't know too much. I learned as I went, grew in appreciation for it, and then I would say I flatlined on it. I didn't read a ton. I picked up a few Puritan paperbacks along the way. Okay. But I would say it really started exponentially growing as I taught church history for the college and the seminary here. Okay. And I would say that's really when I got a love for history. I think as I hit about 29 or 30 is when it really picked up.
Okay.
How about yourself?
Yeah, I think the sort of seeds were planted probably actually when I was an undergrad at a secular institution, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I went to Ohio University in Athens, and I took a history class on the history of the Reformation. And it was fascinating. And the guy who taught it was not a believer, but he was also but he was a good historian.
Yeah.
And so he made it very interesting. He was very fair. There was no agenda driven. I'm going to make you hate. I'm going to tell you everything that's wrong about Christianity. Sure. It was just these are the things that happened. These were the currents happening, and these were the key players and why they did what they did. And then I also took an history of early Christianity course from a different professor there at OU, who was just very engaging, very entertaining, and that also kind of sparked the interest.
Yeah.
And when I went to seminary, I originally thought I was going to go the academic route in systematics. I was going to be a systematic theologian. But then I took a couple church history classes. I'm like, I think I really like church history. And then I sort of became fascinated with Jonathan Edwards. And for probably almost a year of my time in seminary, I thought, I think I'm going to become a Jonathan Edwards scholar. And that was something that had captured my interest. Eventually kind of came back around to I want to be in the text, the text of Scripture. And so that kind of moved me back towards New Testament. But just encountering Edwards was a huge piece of that. And just his mind, his life, his ministry just captivated me. Yeah. So that was kind of the genesis of that. But
any particular works of Edwards that really captured? I imagine the excellencies of Christ, that sermon particularly.
Right. So, I think a lot of people, when they get exposed to Edwards, they get exposed to Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
Sure.
And they get probably exposed to religious affections and maybe freedom of the will.
Yeah.
Those are probably the three most commonly talked about Edwards works. But for me, what was interesting was just reading his sermons. And one of those was The Excellencies of Christ, which I highly encourage people to just Google it. You can find it freely available online. But his ability to stir affection for Christ and just approach – this is part of the beauty of Puritan preaching. They were able to approach a subject or a text from every conceivable angle and squeeze out the theological significance of it. And so it was just captivating.
Yeah. Do you consider – I know Edwards is sort of a borderline. Do you consider him a Puritan?
I'd say he's a transitional figure.
Okay.
He's a late Puritan in that sense because all of his theological influences were basically Puritan. But he also was a man of the early Enlightenment.
Yeah.
And so that he's sort of that transitional bridge figure between kind of what I think of in terms of Puritan versus Enlightenment.
Yeah. How would early American history have changed if because he died fairly young?
He died at 50, either 54 or 55. I can't remember if he had turned. Actually, I think it would have been 54.
So what if he had lived another 20 years? How would that have changed the American founding, do you think? Or would it have?
Well, what would have been especially interesting is that he died in 1758.
Yeah.
I don't know what he would have done.
Yeah.
In the lead up to the Revolutionary War. That to me is the most interesting piece of that is would he have been a proponent of independence or would he have been a supporter? My guess is he probably would have gone with the independence movement. That's my guess.
Well, I could see him seeing the crown kind of stepping on the toes of the colonists.
Yes,
with the Stamp Act and a number of things going on at that time and pushing back, wanting to push back against that.
Yeah, for sure. So, but Edwards is not always the easiest to read.
Yeah,
he takes a little bit more of an investment, I think, at times compared to maybe some other writers. But it's paid off in spades in terms of if you invest the time and the energy.
Yeah.
So,
who else do you like from church history? I mean, we know what we know about Edwards, but who else do you like? Obviously, we're deviating from the list here, but that was a bit of the plan.
Yeah, it's our show. I have enjoyed reading John Owen in terms of his writings.
Okay.
I do enjoy
Mortification of Sin,
Glory of Christ.
Glory of Christ.
And he's got a massive commentary in the book of Hebrews that it's like 7 volumes.
Oh, wow.
So, which I think we'll actually be dipping into a bit as we preach through Hebrews at CCC.
Yeah. Have we announced that yet? Is that public? Mm-hmm. Okay. That is public.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, and then I always have enjoyed the early church.
Okay.
Like the post-apostolic period, like the 2nd century.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get guys eventually like Augustine or Augustine. I'm not sure
how to pronounce that.
Good luck. You get people on both sides of that. And so, but I think it's just fascinating to see the development of the church and see them wrestling with different theological and historical issues and how to live within the Roman Empire and how eventually Christianity, in essence, conquers the Roman Empire.
Yeah, as a grassroots movement.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I try to communicate in church history. That I can't remember what Roman historian wrote this, but he's like complaining that like these Christians, this Christianity, it's spreading not through schools, not through these things, but in tanneries and bakeries and just sort of as people are working, that the gospel is moving out, and I think that's really encouraging.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Through the 1st and 2nd century.
What about you? Any go-to historical figures that you?
Oh my goodness! Well, I knew you were going to ask me that once I asked you that.
It's only fair.
I've been drawn recently to Thomas Watson. So I've been reading some Thomas Watson, Picture of a Godly Man.
Give us just a brief, where does he fit into the historical timeline, roughly?
My goodness. I'm not even sure I know. I believe 1700s England, I believe. But Heart of Christ, Picture of a Godly Man drawn in pencil, I believe is the subtitle. But just where Edwards can be a little thick, I find Thomas Watson a fairly easy Puritan to read.
Yeah.
So I've appreciated him quite a bit. I make all my students read a little bit of Origen. Force them to read Polycarp's accounts of Polycarp. So I appreciate lots of those readings as well. I'm trying to think of others. I enjoy Augustine, however you pronounce that.
Whatever we're calling him this week.
The Confessions are wonderful. I've tried to make my way. You've made your way through City of God. I got
Long time ago.
I got about halfway through City of God and put it down.
It's a large work.
It's massive. I did get a $10 copy at a conference and been off and on over the past 3 years making my way through it.
Yeah. Conceptually, it's great. It's just it's a long book.
It's a slog.
It is. Yeah. It is. All right. So let's talk a little about why does church history matter for the church? I mean, I think one of the general characteristics of the evangelical church, broadly considered, is a lack of historical rootedness or even consciousness is maybe the way to go. That for a lot of average people sitting in the pews, their historical consciousness of the church goes back maybe 20 years, maybe 30.
Yeah.
Essentially their lifetime maybe.
Yeah, probably as far back as Billy Graham.
Yeah, that's probably right. And then even that might be generous if you're talking like early Billy Graham.
Sure.
So why does it matter?
So maybe this isn't a good point at all, but I'll make it anyway. I was a part of a little community pastors gathering 4 or 5 years ago now, and they were saying, how can churches work to better our community? Was sort of like the broad thought. And this one guy stood up and goes on a tirade against, like, we need to get rid of denominations. That's what's going to make our community better. If we get rid of these divisions and everybody can just be in the same church and hear the same preaching, and that's going to unite us and bring us together if we get rid of the divisions and denominations. And I just kind of went, I think you miss the fact that, like, people died over some of these ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. These things exist for a reason.
Yes. Some wars were fought over some of these, over things like baptism and,
right.
things like that. And I think we forget, one of the questions you have to answer is how did we come to be? How did we come to be at this place? And
right.
I think church history helps us get there. So that's my long-winded way of making that point.
Yeah. That's actually a good entry point into some of the stuff from the article itself. He gives 13 principles for why studying church history is
By
crucial.
the way, if I'm ever making a list, it's never going to be 13.
Yeah.
That's a poor number. No, poor number itself.
Okay.
I'd rather have 14.
You're that superstitious.
I'm a little stitious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, his third point in the article is history fits into the divine drama of creation, fall, and redemption. And I think that's a good, helpful reminder. Sometimes we can talk about even the storyline of the Bible, and we do the whole creation, fall, God's promises through to Abraham and to Israel, and then we get to Jesus, and then we get to the early church, and then we realize, okay, well, that's kind of where the Bible ends. You've got Revelation, which is, depending on how you interpret that, I think most people think pointing to the very end. And so there's this gap between like when Acts ends and the very end.
Yeah.
Well, that's where we are.
Yep.
We're still part of the ongoing history of redemption. And so having a good understanding of church history helps us better understand where we're at in that larger drama of redemption. And I also just think, there's the old cliche of those who fail to learn history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And I'm just amazed at the number of contemporary issues that pop up in the church. And it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? The church is like, what do we do? Like, how do we respond to issue A here? It's like, well, actually, if you knew a little bit of church history, you'd realize that the church has already had to face something pretty similar to this. Not the exact same thing,
sure,
but pretty similar to this. And if we look at how they handled it and responded to it, that might provide some resources for us to think about how we respond as contemporary believers to this.
Either positive or negative, right?
For sure.
Right? Like, oh, the church did a really excellent job in that moment, or, oh my gosh, or did a really poor job in that moment.
For sure. So I think that's one helpful point out of there. What else from this article would you want to highlight here?
My goodness. I think number 5, God has unique purposes for his church, right? That if there's one thing that comes out in church history is that God is working in the world through his church. And that is how he is going to work in the future, is going to be through the church. And so the fact that God has unique purposes for it, I think we can miss that. There are some people that want to sort of question some of the institutional church and go out and do their own thing. And I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. His first point there, I think, is also very helpful. He entitles it "Remembering is Vital." It highlights throughout Scripture. That's one of the more common commands that God gives his people. Remember, remember, remember. And warns about, like we just got through Deuteronomy in our church preaching through that. And, the number of times you see in there the warnings of you're going to get into the land, it's going to be amazing, and you're going to forget all that the Lord your God has done for you. And you're going to go worship these other gods. whom you've not known, had nothing to do with you, and you're going to forget all that the Lord your God has done for you.
Yeah.
We're just as prone to forgetting.
Yeah.
And obviously there is a special place for biblically revealed church history that we need to remember and reflect upon. But there's also a place for celebrating and remembering what God has done in the history of the church that's not recorded in the pages of Scripture, but is but is still very valuable as an encouragement for faith, as a testimony of God's faithfulness to His people. And I think this can even be translated down onto a personal level. We are so prone to forget the ways that God intervenes in our lives, that if we don't take time to remember them, to record them, and then to remember them, how easily we forget, things that like, oh yeah, I was so worked up about this situation, and then God came through. And then 2 months later, like, what? We're doubting God's goodness, His faithfulness, His providence, or whatever. We're like, but He just came through for you, but you've already forgotten what you've done for Him. And church history is a more formalized way for the corporate people of God to remember what He has done for us in those ways.
Yeah.
Even on a corporate level for a specific congregation, different ways they've seen God at work in their corporate life as a body.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else you got on here? Anything?
Number 6, theological development doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I just think that's super important to remember that there are other things going on. I always try to remind my students that, like, we're going to spend like an hour in Nicaea. We're going to talk about it. We're going to engage with it. These were people that had lives, that had the same 24-hour days, had the same calendar we had, but this took place over, goodness, months of conversation.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen in an hour in a classroom. Like, well, this makes sense.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It is always interesting when you look at confessional statements. I think that if someone had a almost expert level grasp of church history, I think you could hand them a random confessional statement from some time in the history of the church, and they could probably place it as in terms of when it was written. Because every confessional statement is rooted in its historical context.
Yes.
Especially, and not that doesn't mean that the truth of the gospel changes or anything like that. But what it means is look at what issues are mentioned and what issues are not mentioned. And that gives you a very good indicator of what particular issues were in that historical moment deemed to be most essential or even most debated in that context.
I mean, looking at some of those early creeds, it appears as though the Gnostics have gained a foothold, and the church, the bishops, the pastors are coming together, and being like, we got to deal with this. This is an issue, and it seems to be reflected. You have to do a little mirror reading, right?
Yeah.
But
think about how many doctrinal statements, confessional statements throughout the history of the church have said anything about sexuality and about gender.
Yeah.
I'm hard-pressed to come up with any before the last – I'll be generous and say 100 years. I'd be willing to say 30.
Yeah, I was going to say 25. Yeah.
Well, why is that? Because there was no debate over it.
Yeah.
That was a settled, undebated issue in terms of issues of sexuality and gender.
Yeah.
And now, if you look at a church's website, at least some of them are now going to have a statement in there in terms of their confession of faith of where they stand on, we believe that God created human beings, male and female, and that marriage is the union of one biological male and one biological woman.
Sure.
You're not going to find those statements in the early church. You're not going to find those statements in the Reformation because that issue wasn't up for debate. It was settled. And so even having a sense of the cultural environment in which confessional statements come out of can give you a good sense of, because sometimes you'll read older statements, you're like, that's interesting that made the cut in terms of being in there.
Yeah.
Things like in the whole fundamentalist liberalism debate, things like the virgin birth of Jesus being born of the Virgin Mary, the virgin conception. It's like that's an interesting thing to toss in there necessarily. Well, it's because there were attacks on miracles and things like that.
Sure.
And so you're like, okay, well, we're going to make it clear where we stand on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could talk about each and every one of these points, but we will link the article in the show notes for you to take a look at. We'd also recommend a couple of probably broad overviews is the best way to describe them of church history. The one I use in class is Bruce Shelley, Church History in Plain Language. New edition came out this year. Did you know that?
Fifth edition, I think.
Fifth edition.
You told me about this.
Yeah, I'm not a huge – I like the fourth edition a little bit better, but we do use the fifth edition because that's what you can get.
Right.
And it switched publishers as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's by Bruce Shelley, but
Bruce
the fifth edition is
with his son Marshall.
Updated by his son Marshall, correct? Mm-hmm. Is Bruce Shelley no longer living?
Yeah, I think he passed away 15 plus years ago.
Gotcha. And then the other resource you've got down there is a book by Mark Knoll entitled Turning Points, Decisive Moments in the History of Christianity, which I think is also on its,
fourth or fifth edition. Yeah. I remember I had the second edition when I took church history.
Yeah, I don't remember what edition I have probably. But those are some good resources to check out. And all right, let's take a break. And when we come back from the break, we will do This Day in Sports History. All right. Back from that riveting commercial break. This Day in Sports History. John, what do we have?
August 2nd, 2022. That's today. But
it feels weird to record on the day it launches.
I'm used to seeing like the next day.
Yeah.
But 1938. Excuse me, still got that lingering cough. Almost made it through the whole episode. 1938, MLB conducts the first test of bright yellow baseballs during the Dodgers and Cardinals doubleheader.
Yeah, obviously that didn't stick.
It did in softball.
Yes.
Because they do have the bright yellow baseballs or softballs in softball. 1982, Oakland outfielder Ricky Henderson steals his 100th base of the season in a 6-5 win versus Seattle.
Yes.
That's a lot of steals.
That is. And, I mean, obviously the game goes through its ebbs and flows and evolves, but like the stolen base feels like it's a forgotten element of the modern game.
Absolutely. I mean, you have a big year if you have 30.
Yes.
Yeah, and Ricky Henderson was a character.
Yes.
Spoke about himself in the third person. Anyway.
Did not lack for confidence.
Yeah. 1992, Tom Seaver, Raleigh Fingers, Hal Newhouser, and Bill McGowan are inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's a good group.
That is.
That's a real good group.
Now, I guess I really only know the first two.
Well,
Tom Terrific.
That's really what I'm basing it off of as well. Yes.
Yes.
Did you see they put up a statue of Tom Seaver and they had the wrong jersey number or something along those lines on the statue?
No. Outside of the Mets Stadium or something?
Yeah, outside of Citi Field.
Okay.
It came out like maybe a week after the statue was revealed that something's wrong on it. I think it's the number.
Nice.
Have to double check.
I mean, Raleigh Fingers was famous for his mustache.
Yeah.
Very good relief pitcher as well. But that he had
I'd assume so. I assume they don't put people in there for their mustache.
The curly extensions on the end there. And
yeah. You know they do that with wax? They like really get them going. That takes too much effort. I don't want to buy mustache wax.
Well, side note here. How do you feel? It feels like mustaches are making a comeback.
I think the 1980s are making a bit of a comeback, and so the mustache is a holdover.
Okay, because I'm not a fan.
I can't grow a good mustache.
I don't think a lot of guys can.
Yeah. Well, I think I can think of two right now, some that have been mentioned on this podcast that can't grow a good mustache. Now, I would love to see that individual wax his mustache and see what that would be like.
My father-in-law did that.
Did he really?
He did the curled up ends like Raleigh Fingers had. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. So, fascinating man.
Anyway, 96. The star-studded United States men's basketball team, the Dream Team 3, beat Yugoslavia 95-69 to win the gold medal at the Atlanta Olympics. Was there any question at the 96 Olympics that we were going to win the gold?
Not then. Yeah. No, not then.
And 2012, another Olympics one. American swimmer Michael Phelps wins an unprecedented third consecutive gold medal in the 200-meter of the individual medley at the London Olympics.
Yeah. He was just ridiculously dominant.
Yeah. He might be. Is he the greatest American Olympian ever?
Hey, he's got to be up there.
He's up there.
He's got to be up there.
For sure.
So who do you like out of that list?
Well, some good choices here. I'm willing to discard the yellow baseballs.
Yep, me too.
I'm probably between Phelps and Ricky Henderson.
Okay. I'd go with Phelps.
Phelps?
Yep.
Phelps it is.
All right. One thing you liked?
I got breakfast with Nate in Ohio this morning. Delightful time.
Yes.
Yeah, he was in town for the Lancer golf outing, so.
Yes.
That was nice. And you got some time with him last night?
I did. Yeah, he came by for dinner last night. So good to catch up with him. Same old Nate from Ohio.
Yes, very much so.
He's a classic. My one thing I liked, I'm just sort of doing an expanded weekend here. So my birthday was last Thursday.
Okay.
And then so we
37?
49.
Whew.
Yeah. So I've started my last year in my 40s.
You don't look a day over 42.
Well, I try. But so Friday night we celebrated my birthday as a family. So John came home. Jake was there as well as his lovely girlfriend Autumn. Then Saturday we went to the great state of Ohio. Played some disc golf at Defiance College.
Nice.
Shopped for some Buckeye gear.
I heard about this. I talked to your family about that on Sunday.
And had dinner with my parents. And then Sunday we had there's a couple from our church that's doing a church plant in North Manchester, probably starting in about a year, but they're getting ready to go off to the Sovereign Grace Pastors College. So we had them over for dinner.
Nice.
Fun to hang out with them. And they brought over their new puppy.
Oh, okay.
Isla. It's a mini
It's a golden doodle. Yeah, I was talking to him about that at church. Yeah.
Yeah, so and then, yesterday, Nate from Ohio stops in. So it was a very
social,
full social weekend, but very enjoyable. So, all right, we have talked commercial breaks. We've talked sports. We have talked the value of church history. We've talked about Michael Phelps. We've talked about social engagements with good friends. And so I think, by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.